I posted the ad for this year. I said something about it being an incarnation of Zelma's Cloys. Gave a little personal info. Don't know how much the personal info means to anybody, but the idea was to have a Cloys, which is a concept that unfortunately I didn't realize how many people didn't know. So a Cloys is, I would put it. It serves the same role. It served the same role in Lithuanian culture that the more famous shtibel served among Hasidim. The difference is that Litvaks would socialize over learning. So if you had a room in your house, you figured it was going to be a mini base medrash, and you'd have people coming and to learn, and everything would be very informal, small groups, lots of participation, not some kind of lecture, hint, hint. In other words, feel free to unmute, ask questions, as long as it's not, the timing's not rude. It is not going to be one of these formal settings where we have a chat. You ask questions by chat, and somebody's going to read the Q&A. And no, this I want it to be participatory. I want it to be warm, and frankly, I expect it to be a small group of people. So that was the idea behind Zelmala's Cloys. That, and just I like the poetry of the idea that my ancestors actually had a Cloys. It was ended not by the Holocaust. It was actually ended because Suwalk had a round of pogroms. And as my grandfather said, thank God for that second pogrom, because if the Poles wouldn't have started killing us, we never would have gotten out on time. So that's the Shuey, not now, sweets. So that's the idea behind Zelmala's Cloys. It was, fortunately, my ancestors owned a factory. Fortunately, also the women knew how to run the business. So the job of running the business was split among everybody, which gave the men time to sit in a base medrash part of the day and learn. So we had a Cloys, and I thought it would be nice, in the electronic era to have a Cloys as well, a place where we could come, learn, discuss the topics that are particularly important to me. Most of the people on this call already know what topics those are because you've seen my book. I mean, I know the people here, so I could say that with some certainty. So what I decided to do was the first series of texts that we're going to look at, and we're really going to learn texts. We're not just going to have a handout with 3 lines from this Rishon and 2 lines from that Achron, and they all sum together to make some point I want to make. We're going to sit and look at a text, a rather, multiple paragraph, sit down and learn something. And what I did was I constructed a series starting with the Maharal on Avos, going through the Gra, Perish Al Kama Agados. We're going to look at Rav Volbe. We're going to look at Rav Dessler. Obviously, I'm going to cite things from Rav Shimon's Hakdama, but I don't really plan on sitting down and doing Rav Shimon's Hakdama. I mean, we'll see what happens when we finally get there. But my feeling at this point is, for me personally, covering it yet again would not have as much excitement as preparing something new. So it probably, ironically, will not get the same coverage as other sources. So with that out of the way, I'm going to share my copy of the sources that I collected on Sefaria. I don't know if anybody looked, but yes, there's a picture. So I'll bring that up and discuss that in a minute. If I didn't lose the Zoom. Share screen 1. Okay, so you should all at this point see a page that's almost all Sefaria. I tried to get rid of the border around the web browser. That's about most reading text I was able to get you. So I want to start with a gemara in Yuma. Well, what happened was, so that was going to be the topic. The topic was going to be relationships and the meaning of life. That was the intended topic, and it ties very well into widen your tent and defining holiness in terms of connection and the meaning of life in terms of connection. It's not exactly the same perspective, and which I'm happy with as well. And what do I want to say? Yeah. And because we're starting in Parshas Vayakhel, I wanted a Mishkan tie-in. What were you saying, John? It wasn't John, it was Moshe. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I was saying I thought the meaning of life is 42. Are you teaching me new things here?
Okay, sorry. It's only 42 if you're a dolphin or a mouse.
Fair enough.
Okay, so let's start with this Gemara in Yuma. So Amar Yochanan. It's a pretty well-known Gemara. I think it appears in Rashi, which is the one way Gemara is guaranteed to be well-known. So it says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shlosha Zerim Hein. So in the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan, 3 utensils had crowns. Shel Mizbeach, on the Mizbeach, they mean the gold Mizbeach with the Ketores on it. Shel Aron, the Aron Kodesh had one. Shel Shulchan, and on the Shulchan on the table. Shel Mizbeach, Zacha Aaron v'Natlo. So the crown that belongs on the Mizbeach, Aaron and his family, they inherited it, they took it, meaning that there's something about the role of Aaron and the Kohen that relates in particular to the Mizbeach, which is not particularly surprising. Mizbeach, Avodas Hashem, Karbanos, it's what the Kohanim do. Okay, makes sense. Shel Shulchan, Zacha David v'Natlo. So the crown on the Shulchan, that David merited and took. So the Shulchan has something to do with being king, because that's David's, right? That's the monarchy. And Edleah Shel Aron Adayin Munahu. The crown on the Aron is still sitting on the Aron. Kala Rotze Likach, whoever wants to take the crown, Yavo v'Yikach, could come and take it. So it's not like the Kahuna, which only goes to Aaron's family. It's not like the Malucha, which only goes to David's family. The Torah is for everybody, at least for every Jew. I mean, let's be a little more honest there. Shema Tomar Pachusu. So you might think that the reason why it's a free for all is because it's less important than the other ones. Talmud Lomar Bi Malachim Yimlochu. In me, meaning with the Torah, kings rule. So you see that the what's it called? The crown of Torah is the cause or necessary for the crown of Melucha. Right? Kings can only rule if the Torah is the underlying principle. That's what the pasuk says, and it's left to be implied by the Gemara that the same thing would be true for a Kohen. That there's no Kahuna and Avodas Hashem until you already have the crown of Malach of Torah. So far, so good. Everybody okay? Okay. So Shlosha Zerin. So Rashi on this Gemara. Nasu bichli hakodesh shel mizbeach siman lekeser kahuna. So what it's saying is the zer, the crown ornamentation on the top of the golden mizbeach, is a symbol of the crown of kahuna. Shel Aron siman lekeser Torah. The one on the Aron is that of Torah. Shel Shulchan siman lekeser Malchus. It's a sign for the crown of the king. Shel Shulchan hu siman la'osher malachim. Because the Shulchan with the bread on it is a sign, a symbol of the wealth of kings. So that is how Rashi explains these 3 crowns being related to these 3 domains of rule. Rambam actually paraphrases, brings a totally different presentation. Israel got 3 crowns: Keser Torah, Keser Kahuna, Keser Malchus, the same 3. That's why I consider it the same topic. Keser Kahuna Zacha Bo Aaron. So Aaron and his children got to be the Kohanim. Shenemar v'haisa lo zaro acharav bris kunas olam. Pasuk I know well because I still remember the first Ali of my members of Parsha. It shall be for him and his children after him a covenant of Kahuna. And that's actually not made to Aaron. The pasuk he quotes is actually Pinchas. Now you all know my birthday's Parshas Pinchas. I expect presents. Keser Malchus. So the crown of kingship. Zachabot David. Shenemar Zara le'olam yishyev v'chis'og chishemen negdi. Chishemesh negdi. It will always be for his children, and his throne will be like the sun for me. Keser Torah harei munach va'omed. That's an exact quote of the Gemara. The idiom munach va'omed, it rests and stays. Umuchan l'chol Yisrael, and is prepared for all of Israel. Shenemar Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha kilas Yaakov. Right, Torah. Moshe commanded us the Torah. It's an inheritance for the entire congregation of Yaakov. Interestingly, remember the point I made that when we said everyone, it really only says it really only speaks of Jews. So the Rambam in his precision actually says the Chol Yisrael. Shenemar Torah Kol Misha Yirtze Yavo V'Yitol. Whichever Jew wants could come and take. That's the literal quote of the Gemara. Shema Tomar Sha'osam Aksarim Gdolim Mikisar Torah. So I might have thought that those crowns were greater. Harehu Omer Bi Malachim Yimlochu V'Roznim Yechoku Tzedek. It's the same quote except with a more complete. Bi Yisharim Yishoru Halamadata, which Bi Sarim Yisoru. In me, the leader shall lead, the princes shall prince. Halamadta shekeser Torah gadol mishnehem. This teaches you that the crown of Torah is greater than the other two, which is a slightly different point than the Gemara made. The Gemara said, Shema ki malachim yilochu. Oh, the Gemara didn't say it. I did. I forgot. So bi malachim yimlochu really only says that you need Torah to be a king. It doesn't actually say that Torah is greater. There's a difference between being the precondition, which is one way of being more important, and being greater. The Rambam makes it clear that he's trying to get from the bi malachim yimlochu and the bi sarim yisoru that the keser of Torah is greater than the other two.
Isn't that implicit? If King David had his crown, and he also needed the Torah to be able to have the rulership, that means he was not able to have his crown of kingship, of royalty, without the Torah. So that means that Torah is greater than that.
My feeling of the difference between a precondition and greater, right? In order to teach Torah to the typical Anglo kid, you have to teach him Aleph Beis, right? Is Aleph Beis greater than the rest of the Torah they're going to learn?
Isn't there a famous story which does not mean that it's a true story, but a famous story with the Gaon of Vilna, where he would only stand in front of his Aleph Beis Rebbe because he learned the Aleph Beis from him, and therefore he was able to learn everything else, but the other teachers in his life weren't able to keep up with him?
Okay. I just want you to not concede the point, but see why I don't think A necessarily implies B.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, it could be in this case that Aleph Beis is greater, but those are different statements, right? So I would say saying that Torah is necessary to be a holy king or a good king or an effective king or whatever is a different statement than saying that the crown of Torah is greater than the crown of kingship.
Fair enough.
Are you, Rav Micha, are you going to leave that as a as a question on the table, or is this a setup that you're going to come back and,
No,
tell us
it is. It is not even. I wasn't even thinking of it as a question on the table. I just thought it was an interesting observation.
I agree. I never thought of it, but it's a very good point about that.
Right. The Rambam is clearly taking it as Moshe Yehuda did. The Rambam is clearly saying it's necessary because it's primary.
Mm-hmm.
Because he takes the Gemara and he adds a statement saying it is greater. I'm just saying that, that somebody could have taken the Gemara to just mean that it's, come on. The idea that being king is more important than Torah, it doesn't really fit the way any of us do Judaism. What
do you think is the original intent in Mishlei? In context. So Mishlei is singing these praises of wisdom and Torah in particular, and it's saying, through the wisdom of Torah, rulers rule. So it seems to be all about praising Torah. But if you really take it apart, you'd say, okay, well, it sounds like the gold standard is to be a ruler, and Torah is like that great or almost that great or instrumental to getting that great. But I hear that critique. It's not exactly a way of saying Torah is better than gold or lead. When you say Torah is as great as gold, that doesn't mean it's greater than gold. You have to say it's greater than. You think it's greater than.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting. The Rambam does take it to mean greater than. Bottom line, or at least his bottom line. So now I want to show you this crazy picture I doodled up. Some people may recognize this. Art Scroll made this map of the second base at Mikdash publicly available. Not too sure they're happy that I doodled all over it, but they made it publicly available. And I'm going to zoom in a little. And what I'm showing, I want to show you the 3 kalim that I put stars on. Okay? I put Magen David's around. Why? Because I couldn't draw a crown well, and Magen David was one of the shapes that Microsoft Paint gave me. But I really wanted 3 crowns because this is where the Mizbeach HaZahav is, where the Ketores is burned. This is the Shohan. This is the Aron in the second base of Mikdash, but the layout's the same as at the Mishkan, just larger scale. Notice that the Torah, which is greater than the other 2, is placed in a position 1 step higher. So you have the Mizbeach HaZahav and the Shulchan are in the Heichal. They're in the main room of the Beis HaMikdash. And the Kodesh HaKodashim has the Aron. So it's 1 step up. So if we look at the 3 crowned items, their placement reflects what the Rambam said, that Torah is greater than the other 2, because Torah is 1 step up. Now, when I came to that realization, which frankly was years and years ago, I noticed, though, that there are 6 kalim in the parashas of the Mishkan. Only 3 of them have crowns, 3 of them don't. And that's why I drew 3 with circles. And I color-coded them because I feel that there's some kind of parallel. And I'll tell you why I say that. The menorah, we talked about the Aron being the crown of Torah. But metaphors that place the menorah as a symbol of Torah or wisdom are also very common. So the menorah and of the uncrowned items, the menorah is most like the Aron in terms of how we use it, how we think about it, what it represents. And now the 2 that I put in blue, this is a Mizbeach and this is a Mizbeach. The parallel is, they both burn things, although this is also 1 step lower because here you're taking physical objects and you're raising them up. And here you're taking intangible. What you're actually sacrificing is a smell. There's no tangibility. In fact, in halacha, you can't steal smells. you can't be held culpable for taking somebody's smell. I'm not sure how you could take a smell anyway. Smells are more shared than taken. But intangibles can't be stolen. And among the thing, in terms of having to repay somebody. So this is a topic that comes up, by the way, in discussions of copyright law. Intangibles cannot be stolen. So whatever it is that copyright law is, you are not stealing intellectual property. There are other ways to address it. It is usher. I know of 8 different explanations, but theft is a really hard one to argue because it's an intangible. So yeah, so that makes it, that would explain why one has a crown and the other one doesn't. The last one is the most tenuous connection, though, and that is the Kior and the Shohan. They both have a certain earthiness because the Shohan is the symbol of kings, but it's the symbol of kings providing bread. The Rambam called it the wealth of kings, but it's also 12 loaves that support each other. There's a symbolism of community. There's a symbolism of providing a person's physical needs. And the Kior is, one second. I'll finish the parallel and then let you speak. And the Kior is about washing and preparing yourself and getting away from undue physicality. So there is some kind of parallelism, but what really to me lent the idea that there's a parallel here is I can't believe that everything else the other two had a parallel and that one didn't. And the menorah and the menorah and the aron both being about wisdom and Torah, and the shulchan, the mizbeach and the mizbeach, I just can't believe that the shulchan and the kior aren't connected. That said, I don't really plan on talking about the 3 uncrowned symbols until we get to the gra. It has to do with a point I'm going to try to make about relationships versus the space in which we have those relationships. In other words, the shulchan, I said, has some kind of physicality, but it's also a king supplying for the people because it's in this world. It's okay. By the time we get to the gra, I'll have to spell it out in more detail anyway. But it's in this world that we encounter other people. It's in our mind that we encounter Torah. It's, avoda is, the heaven world to come. It's not here. It's not, right? We're elevating beyond this world, right? The pillar of smoke that rose straight from the Mizbeach, which, by the way, was the big Mizbeach, not the little one. Right? There's a sense of going up. So there's three relationships and 3 spaces. The Maharal I'm going to use to discuss to introduce the 3 classes of relationships, and the gra I'm going to use to introduce the 3 classes of space. Okay, so that was that. Given that those are the first texts we were going to look at, I felt that calling the beginning of the series Bilvavi, that I will create a Mishkan in my heart, was an apt title. And I wanted to start doing the parshiot of the Mishkan because, to me, all of these ideas are symbolized in the Mishkan. When I hear these parshiot, these are the ideas I'm playing with. One last thing before we leave the picture. Notice that there's 2 sets of 3 kalim. When it comes to clothing, there's 2 sets of 4. Because the regular Kohen's wearing 4 items of clothes, and the Kohen Gadol has 4 extra ones. Getting into the Kabbalah of 3 versus 4 is way ahead of us. I hope it's way ahead of us because I don't know it yet. It's a topic I'm researching now, and if I get an answer, maybe it'll be put into the syllabus. Right now, the syllabus doesn't go that far, though. Who was it that I made wait?
Maybe it was me. Did I try to interrupt earlier?
Somebody tried to ask a question, but I stopped them after half a syllable, so I don't know who. Like
Okay.
I didn't hear enough voice to identify.
It's just that before I was wearing a headset, but it had gone through the laundry, so I didn't know if the mic was working.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I was thinking in terms of your sets of three there, that the Shohan is the Shohan, I guess, would symbolize the Malchus because it's got the 12 loaves on it. It's about, it's about the 12 shvatim. Ideally, not that we have 10 of them anymore. But so it has a 12, but that would indicate, that indicates a link to the land, and the fact that it's bread is what we bring forth from land, the motzi lechem min haaretz. I'm thinking about, and I'm also thinking about the Kior. I guess that if the one is bread, the other is water, and the two are necessities of life.
Very good. I did not think of the bread and water thing because I was busy thinking of the king who is ruling over space, and the Kior being a way to leave this world to start your avoda to go to the next world, to go to the spirituality stuff. It's not. I'm not contradicting you. I'm just
no. I'm just asking.
Is the Kior it's a great idea. It's just not the direction I'm going in.
Is I forget, is the Kior the thing that's described as a molten sea?
Yes.
Okay. So
the Yam Shel Shlomo, that the one that's not a book, is the first base of Mikdash's Kior.
Okay.
Or the water supply under the first. You see this black dot that's next to the Kior? That's where you put the Kior in at night. Yeah.
So with the bread and water, there might also be a parallel of land and sea, but that's about it.
Very good.
Since it's described as a yam.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so there's a certain threeness to the human condition. And that's really what we're going to be looking at first. So you talk about threes, the most famous three, Shimon HaTzadik. I'm now in Avos, Parak 1, Mishnah Beis. Shimon HaTzadik Shiur Knesset Hagdola. He was among the survivors or the remnants of the Anshe Knesset Hagdola. So we're now quoting a bridge figure from Anshe Knesset Hagdola to the Chachamim, to Chazal. He's not yet one of the Zugos. He knew Nevi'im. I don't think anybody says he was one. But he was the last person. He was the last generation to actually have met a Navi. Well, it kind of depends on how the timeline works at the beginning of the second base of Midrash and what you do with the extra years and whatever. But it could be. I mean, he's that kind of transition figure. Details are kind of up to grabs when you talk about the history of this period. Hu Haya Omer, he said, Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Hamei, the world stands on three things. Torah al avoda val gemilas chasadim. So the argument I was making was the three crowns. Let's ignore the other three kelim for the moment. The three crowns are Torah, avoda, and gemilas chasadim, and that's why the king is the bread, because he is gomal chesed. We're about to look at Derekh Chaim Perak Aleph, Mishnah Beis. The Vav through Lamed is just what paragraph numbers, because that's the way Sefaria works. So one of the things that the Maharal does later on in Perak Aleph is he contrasts the statements of the Zugos between the Av Beis Din and the Nasi. And he says the Av Beis Din, the head of the Beis Din, is always talking about justice. And the Nasi is always talking about kindness. And he goes through each Mishnah and he explains each one. He says the reason for all the debates between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai it was shalosh shimshu es rabosim. They didn't apprentice well under their rabbis. So what happens if you don't apprentice under the head judge? You think that being a judge is who he is and not what he did. And when you apprentice under the Nasi, you think that being a Baal Chesed was all, the be all and end all, and there was no place for justice. And he said that's where the split between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel started. And therefore, the reason why we side with Beis Hillel is because this world needs chesed more than it needs justice. This is a very common theme in Kabbalah. There are other reasons. There are other explanations for the difference between them. The point I wanted to make, though, was the Nasi, who was chosen to be a descendant of David, is seen by the Maharal as a chesed figure. Like the main job of the Nasi is not to write laws; it's to provide for the masses. That was the reason for that little detour, because we're about to look at Derekh Chaim for quite a while. And so I wanted to bring so a little background as to what the author, the Maharal, thinks about what a king is.
So that's the same concept as that leadership is really servitude to the people that you are leading. Yes,
and why America uses the phrase public servants, and hope your public servants actually believe that. So the first 5 paragraphs, and the reason why we're starting at paragraph 6, is an exploration of the introduction. Why are we told that he's from the remnants of Anshe Knesset Gedolah? Why is that important to us? Why is he called Shimon HaTzadik? What does this quote have to do with the previous quote, which was said by Anshe Knesset Gedolah? So to get to our theme, I just skipped that topic. But if you click on the title on an electronic version of this sheet, you could get there. You could scroll up. You could look ahead. You could look at the previous paragraphs. I mean, it's Maharal for Hebrew, the Maharal on Avos is pretty readable, as you're about to see.
All right, they're cooking.
Pardon? Okay.
Sorry, I forgot to mute.
Okay. So now we're picking up at paragraphs. It is 6th paragraph, where the Maharal starts addressing what Shimon HaTzadik actually said. He gives us a little background. Umasha Adam Hu Tov. What does it mean that a person is good? Acha Omer Malav Kama Bria Zu Tova. That people would say about him, oh, what a great creation. Hainu Kishu Tov Be'atzmo. The person has to be inherently good in and of himself, even in and of themselves. V'rotza lomar, b'tzad bechinas atzmo yesh bo tov. What do we mean? We mean that with respect to oneself, he is good. Zeu bechina achas, but that is one attribute, one aspect. Shomer malav habriya hazos yesh l'mala. They will say that this creature has some elevated level, elevated plane. V'hi tova mitzad atzma. It's good in and of itself. Habechina shenis. What's the second way in which a person can be good? Sharayi tov l'shamayim. Person is good in how they relate to heaven. Hu Hashem Yisbarach, meaning God. Asher bara es ha'adam, who created the person. V'yichya oved alav, and the person serves, worships Hashem. Oser ritzono, does his will. Hagimel, what's the third way in which a person can be good? Sheroi sheyichya tov al zulaso, that a person be good el zulaso, to the other, mibnei adam, from human beings, or shehim nimtzayim imo, that are found near him, or we would say in English that he is found among. Ki ein ha'adam nimtza bilvad, a person does not exist alone. Raku nimtza im bnei adam zulaso, person lives as part of a community. Adam tov b'chol minei bechinos asher yivchana adam. Now that we just defined 3 ways in which a person's good, a person has to be good in all of them. In be'erech atzmo, tzarich sheyitov, in his own self-worth, he has to be good. Sharei teikav miyad b'masa bereshis nemar b'chol habriya ki tov, because immediately all of creation was told it is good. So something should be good, as in of good quality. Shemizet tirish habriya ba'atzma tzarich sheheba hatov. Creation needs that it has the good thing in it. And if a person has this ability to elevate, then he should be good. Oh no, I did that wrong. Person should be good at elevation, at growth, at climbing. And if he has a word,
perhaps it's Ilah, the cause, like the supreme cause. So his creator.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I appreciate that. Klal hadavar. So, what is the big picture, the overarching general here? A person has to be good in all parts. Because each one is totally different than the other. In the introduction, we also explained these 3 things. Gemara parakama de Kiddushin, and in the first chapter of Kiddushin, Memon Maharal, Amr leTzadik ki tov, v'chiyesh tzadik sheino tov. Yeshaya, apparently the person who put in the Mar Malcolm says it's a paraphrase of Yeshaya, because he says Re'eh Yeshaya. He doesn't just say Yeshaya. So tell the tzaddik he is good. So the question is there a tzaddik who isn't good? Right? Like, what does it mean that the tzaddik speak of the tzaddik that is good? Ela tov l'shamayim ve'eno tov l'brios. It's possible for somebody to be good when it comes to God, to heaven, but not good when it comes to other people. Gee, you think? Never encountered stories like that. Zeu tzaddik she'eno tov. That would be a somebody who's a tzaddik, but not tov. Tov l'shmayim v'tov l'brios. Somebody who's good to heaven and good to brios. Zeu tzaddik shu tov. Ad kan. Somebody who's both good to the one in heaven and good to other people, to other creations. That it would be a tzaddik who is tov. So much for the quote. From Kiddushin. And still, in all of this, a person has to be complete in and of themselves. Because if you don't have that, you cannot be a tzaddik at all. It doesn't need it. It goes without saying. Every creation has some kind of fittingness, some kind of goodness. So therefore, you see, a tzaddik has to be good in all ways. I believe what he's saying is, especially in this last part, a person has to be good in their relationships to the one who created us. A person has to be good in our relationship to other people. And this is impossible, right? If you're not good inherently, if you're not shalem, if you don't have shleimus, the people who know me from Musar Institute just heard me fall back into old habits, because I'm used to, when videoing, I'm used to talking to people who are used to shleimut. But what comes more naturally to me in most settings is shleimus. If a person doesn't have shleimus, then a person cannot relate well to God and cannot relate well. So the im lokain, if a person doesn't have shleimus, eino tzaddik klal. And therefore, this need for 2 relationships ends up becoming a need for 3 relationships, because you have to be able to relate to yourself, because how are you going to get shleimus if you're not working on yourself?
I think he's contradicting himself here.
In what way?
Well, he quotes the Gemara, and the Gemara says that, is there such a thing as a tzaddik who's not good? So why are we using the word tzaddik? It means someone who is good to heaven and he's not good to people. This is a tzaddik who's not good, right? So that means that you could be a tzaddik just partially. This guy is still a tzaddik. He's just not a great tzaddik, right? And it doesn't, the Gemara doesn't actually say the opposite case, somebody who's good to people and not good to heaven, which is a very interesting category to skip, because that's a big category of people. But that's just an aside. But it does seem that you could have a tzaddik who's not so good, but he's still a tzaddik. Then he says, when he's taking the lesson out, if a person has to be good inherently, and if he's not inherently good, he's not a tzaddik at all. Well, didn't we just say that you could be a partial tzaddik?
Right. So it's interesting. I saw this as a different, what's it called? I read the whole thing differently, which is, I guess, why this didn't bother me. Yeshaya praises a tzaddik who is good, right? You shouldn't talk about tzaddikim who aren't good. You should talk about tzaddikim who are good, which would explain why the Gemara is just trying to differentiate between a tzaddik who's good, tzaddik who's not good, and doesn't discuss a good person who's not a tzaddik. Because that's not the focus of the verse. And then I saw him using the word tzaddik and tov as Yeshaya used them. And then the second he stopped talking about Yeshaya, he uses the word tzaddik differently. So you know what I mean? Like, he is darshaning the pasuk by saying tzaddik refers to bein adam l'makom and tov refers to bein adam l'chavero. Not that the word tzaddik is always bein adam l'makom and the word tov is always bein adam l'chavero. Or the way you read it, he's a lesser grade tzaddik because he doesn't have the bein adam l'chavero. I was reading it as he's darshaning tzaddik in the pasuk is a buzzword for one positive quality. Tov is for another, and therefore he then reminds you, but you need shleimus, the third quality.
To you, does tzaddik mean, to you and everyone else, does tzaddik mean the same thing as tov? And vice versa? I'm not sure it does. Tov maybe I see tov as something as inherent, like it's good, that's literally what it means. Tzaddik is more like, tzaddik turdov. It's like upright or righteous or doing really right? So tzaddik is really how you relate to others.
Right, right. So I was a little startled by the Gemara because I didn't question the Gemara because it's a Gemara and wasn't the mode I was in. But, I took the Gemara as the primary source and I didn't question it. But I was a little startled that tzaddik was taken as bein adam l'makom because I thought of tzidkus as, you don't give it stuck at a God, you give it stuck at other people. Right? Tzidkus is Chazim talk about a tzaddik, right, as a conduit to God. But I don't think in those terms. I'm not Hasidish. So to me, that was startling, aspect to the pasuk. But that was the way the Gemara took the pasuk, so I did. Should I open this up and see if Rashi addresses anything about tzidkus and the anybody else interested or just the two of us?
I guess I was just wondering, is he addressing? This is just beginnings of what I'm sure is a very long piece, but is he saying that the Mishnah is addressed to the tzaddik, or is it saying that this is the integrated personality is what one should aspire to? Because I don't think most of us think of ourselves as a tzaddik. Maybe a Beinoni. And certainly not a Beinoni, but a regular Beinoni.
I did reach the end of the of the Mishnah, so I could tell you, like, with spoilers. He's just defining good here.
Okay.
He's not telling you who the Mishnah is speaking to. He's just saying there's different kinds of good. There's what Yeshayahu called tzaddik, as the Gemara defines it. There's what Yeshayahu calls tov, as define it, and shleimus. Or there's a tzaddik, there's a good tzaddik who has two kinds of perfection, and then you need shleimus, or else you have neither, which is, I think, closer to the way Moshe Yehuda saw this Gemara.
Can I ask you for another spoiler, Micha?
Yeah.
Is he talking about the Mishnah, the subject of the Mishnah, three things that the rule stands upon, or is he talking about the coder, the speaker of the Mishnah, Shimon HaTzadik, who happens to be a tzaddik, the Mishnah says?
Okay, you're not going too far with the spoiler, because the next sentence that we didn't get to is,
Okay.
Right, and therefore the Tana opens with the word stands on three things.
The Tana will happen to be a tzaddik himself.
Yeah, that's actually, I did not make that connection until you spelled it out this second. Like the first time you made that statement, I didn't realize what you were saying. No. He's not focused on the word tzaddik. He brought a proof text from the Gemara that it's possible that the Gemara values two different, right? It values the tzaddik, but it values the tov labrios. That there's a tov l'shamayim and a tov labrios. I think this phrase is what he quoted it for, because he said that there are multiple kinds of tov, and this Gemara points out two kinds of tov. And then he has to step out of the Gemara to say that there has to be an inherent tov in the person, or else he can't accomplish those two. Ki kol habriya b'atzma yesh ba tov. I mean, that was the way I read it. Again, the way you read the Gemara is plausible. So I don't want to say it's the only, I'm right, just because I looked at it before we sat down and you're looking at it now, right? That's the only difference between us,
I'm right.
Okay. Okay. Well, Tana hazeh. Oh, so any other comments before we start another paragraph?
Yeah. There's something I missed. You said, what were you trying to answer? I asked the question as an aside, but I think you answered it as an aside. Why do you think it doesn't say the situation of the person who is a tzaddik to
okay.
people and not to God?
What is the pasuk in Yeshaya you're referring to?
I don't know. I have to look it up. Honestly, I'm not so good at it.
Okay. Speak about the tzaddik that he is good. So the question the Gemara asks is about the quality of a tzaddik. How do you have a good tzaddik as opposed to a bad tzaddik? The Gemara is not asking how to, can you have a good person who's not a tzaddik? It's asking, how is there a tzaddik to be praised for being good? Isn't that by definition what a tzaddik is? That's the question the Gemara is really addressing. And therefore, it doesn't deal with good people who aren't tzaddikim.
Okay, Rashi explains that pasuk as, tell the tzaddik that he did well.
Oh, well, that's not the Gemara. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's tell the tzaddik that he was nice to people.
The end of the pasuk is Kiprima Aleihim Yechil. It is a quote, by the way. The citation.
So I have no idea what the Re'eh was, or why when I looked it up, I didn't think it was a good match. Well, I did check.
Because there's no lamed in the actual pasuk. It's tzaddik kitov, not imri lat tzaddik kitov.
Right.
Okay,
right.
so that is the difference. Okay, I thought there was something. I mean, just I prepared it long enough ago. I said, it doesn't match. Oh, but there's a resh. That's probably why. And then I just didn't go beyond that. That was
Rashi over there does interpret the pasuk as if there was a lamed there. Imru l'mishu tzaddik hitayvasa.
Right, and that's clearly the way the Maharal is thinking about it also, because he quoted it as though the pasuk had a lamed.
Right.
Or maybe how the copyist thought of it, and it's not in the original. I don't know.
Okay.
Ulakach hischil atana hazeh devarav, and therefore, or accordingly, that this Tana opens his words Al Shlosh Dvarim Ha'olam Omeid Al Torah Al Avoda Al Gemilas Chasadim. Ki kasher yesh ba'adam haTorah hu nechshav bria tova ba'atzmo. Torah is the means of becoming a good person in and of myself. So Torah is about shleimus. Shleimus says he used the word up here, right? Not shleimus as I would use the word. And I'm not saying they're different. I'm just pointing out he uses the word shleimus. Kasher yesh bo Torah hasiklis, when he has the Torah of wisdom, sichlis, we think a maskil is somebody with academic knowledge, so we think seichel is brain work, but haskil is really applicable knowledge, which makes it a very different thing than we normally think of it. Right, haskil is knowing how to, how to take all that. We could talk about how great it is to give tzedakah, but somebody with, Deya, Bina, and Haskell, it's knowledge, understanding that knowledge, and then being able to live that knowledge. That's the way, at least that's the way the Gra takes Haskell. Aval im ein bo Torah, ein hadam ba'atzmo nechshav tov. If there's no Torah in the person, then the person is not thought of as tov. Ki chaser mimenu haTorah, shehi hashlama ha'adam b'mashu adam. He's lacking the Torah, which is the shleimus of a person in being a person. V'unim shalk behema nidmeh. And that person is compared to an animal. Ve'in zeh nechshav bria, not called a person. Ein roi lo mitzuyos, is not worthy of existing. Val davar zeh amru, that's pretty heavy stuff. Val davar zeh amru Razal, Chazal say on this in Shabbos, Amar Reish Lakish, my dichsiv vayhir evoker yom hashishi. What does the Torah mean when it says vayhir evoker the sixth day? Hey Yisera Lamali, why the sixth? The, right? Why? What's extra hey for? Malamed shehisna HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereishis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a condition in creation. Im Yisrael makablim es Torah atem eskaimim. If the Jews end up accepting the Torah, this world will exist. V'im lav ani makzir eschem lesohu. Adkan, end quote. If not, then the world's going back to tohu vavohu. Perish there, to explain. Hu Torah. A person does not inherently, any person who is created do not have divine wisdom. Divine wisdom's the Torah. Afki ha'adam hu bal seichel, but if the person has a little seichel, ein zerak seichel enoshi, that's human wisdom. Shu mitzurah felachomer, which is attached to substance. Bein rai lo olam hakiyum b'shvil atov zeh. That is not good enough to justify the existence of the world. Ki pachos b'shafel hu ha'seichel enoshi. Seeing how puny human intellect is. Rak b'shvil Torah shu ha'seichel eloki, only for the Torah, which is divine wisdom. Hu ha'tov ha'gamor, which is complete good. V'oz yesh ma'ala El ha'olam b'asher yesh ba'olam ha'torah sichlis eloki. Again, I read it as Malet, and now I'm thinking maybe that is the cause of the world, that the Torah exists in it, which is divine wisdom. The ein zeh das chachma noshis. It's not human das or human chachma. What do I want to say about this? Yeah, so I wanted to complete a sentence, but I want to go back there a second. When a person does not have Torah, they are no more than an animal. That was what he said. Where does he say it? I read so much that I can't find where he said it.
think scroll up a bit.
That's why I can't find it. I was looking too far down. Right. This is a complete. Right. This is the completion of a human as a human, and a person without it would be compared. Behema nidme would be compared to an animal. So I heard this, and I was thinking about, a thought that I haven't widened. An animal lives for his chomer. An animal lives for physical need, right? It doesn't have a concept of the future. It doesn't have a concept of a higher calling. And that by the Maharal saying that a human perfection requires Torah, first thing is my mind rebels and says, well, does this mean that they require studying Torah? Like somebody who embodies an idea of Torah without knowing the Torah exists, right? Do they have no Torah in them and don't have a measure of shleimus? But the second thing was that he's defining the purpose of Torah as giving us, first of all, giving us shleimus, and second of all, bringing our horizons out further than that of an animal. He talks about the connection to the physical, right? So a person, what I just described it was on Rav Shimon's scale of development, the lowest level was somebody who thinks they're a body, which echoes what the Maharal is saying here about he's attached to his physical. Person thinks they're a body. And then one step up is a person who realizes their body and soul. And so I see the Torah as getting you to that first step. You realize that you're a body and soul because now you have an ability to study divine wisdom and not wisdom that's originating in the body. The only real problem I have with this is that there are people I admire who never studied Torah. I mean, let's take the real gimme case, right? Sempo Sigihara probably never opened the Chumash, right? Are you going to tell me that the good he didn't embody godliness and shleimus? Or are we going to say that it's possible for somebody to stumble upon divine wisdom by osmosis, and that's still called Torah? Like learning Torah from the cat, the rooster, and the ant. Everybody get the reference to the gemara I'm throwing out there? It's off the cuff, so I can't do a good quote, but I'm kind of wondering if I'm okay with the idea that a person can't reach any level of shleimus. I mean, complete shleimus, yes, I'm willing to say you need to learn Torah to get to complete shleimus. If I didn't believe that, I'd have a lot more hours in the day to go do fun things. But actually, that's not true. My Torah study is sometimes fun things. But I'm committed to studying Torah out of my commitment for shleimus, for knowing what God considers a perfect person. I balk at the idea that that's the only way to get any shleimus.
Well, he's talking about two different things here. He's talking about Tov, and that harkens back to the last paragraph where it talks about a person being a tzaddik, and he's talking about the difference between man and animal, which is less than Tov, which is seichel, right?
I don't see that at all. Okay, like last time I kind of saw, okay, he read the Gemara in a way differently than I, and I can't insist one is more correct. I can't even decide if one is more correct, but here, no. The last paragraph was all about defining Tov, and he said there are three kinds of Tov. He quotes a pasuk that says the word tzaddik. He explains the pasuk. He uses a gemara to explain the pasuk, and that's the only way in which tzaddik comes up. It's not really a discussion of tzidkus. It starts with there are three kinds of Tov. The Tov in and of oneself. There's the second aspect of Tov, which is Tov l'shamayim, which is exactly what the pasuk called tzaddik. And the third kind of Tov, which is Tov el zulaso mibnei adam,
He's saying that's really one type. He's saying you got to have to really be called type. You have to have the inherent type, and that'll bring to the other two levels of type, which is to other people and to God. And
well, I don't know if levels. They're aspect. They're bechinos.
Aspect.
Bechinos
Okay,
are. Yeah. It's not like a ladder.
You can't be type without having it all. So it's not really three different kinds. It's maybe three aspects, right? Right. But really, it's only one, but it just reflects in two different directions. And if you don't have that inherent thing, you could reflect in one direction or the other, but you're not going to be inherently good.
Right. But I do think he's saying, though, that a person who is good to the other, not inherent, aside from any inherent goodness, has a goodness. Because he says there are three bechinos of Tov. It is Tov to be good to other people, regardless of the concept of shleimus. It is Tov to worship Hashem, regardless of the concepts of being good to other people or shleimus. There are three different expressions of Tov, but he calls each of them Tov. He doesn't say one's part, like primary or... In fact, if the fact that he doesn't consider one primary is really why I think this is a different message to the Rosh Shimon's. Because Rosh Shimon makes Torah and Avoda handmaidens to Gemilas Chasadim. The main point of worshiping God is to bring his good to others. Right? The our greatest desire should be to be nice to other people. I mean, to be a benefit to other people, whatever you want to call it. But he makes one a handmaiden to the other, and I'm seeing the Maharal as giving the idea that there's three primary values. They may not be able to really stand independently, but they are three separate amudim of the world. And if we finish this paragraph, we'll see why three aspects of a person are considered amudim of the world. And each of them are a aspect of what Tov means.
You say, if we finish this paragraph, as if I'm never going to let you. Go ahead, please do.
No. It's 8:05, and I don't know how long people will stay away. I mean, I didn't know if we're running to 8:15 or 8:30. That was really what was on my head. No. I told you at the intro when I discussed why I'm calling this a close. I want the discussion. I don't want the... If nothing else, with my throat, I can't sit here and talk for an hour, 15 minutes after a day of work. I just don't have the energy or the vocal cords. As I pour myself another cup of tea, in case you're wondering why that arm is moving in the corner. So anyway, yeah. So that's sort of, yeah. I think here I don't see things the way you're describing. But also here, you're now questioning the central thesis of that the Maharal is actually supporting my thesis. So, however long we're going to study the Maharal, you're undercutting it. No. So I meant was I have negios.
Fair enough. Go for it.
Okay. So I believe this is the way to read it. I don't see your way of reading it. I invested a lot in reading it this way, and that's the best I could do to address what you said.
Well, you raised a question, and you didn't have an answer.
Which was what?
Which was, what about the people who were good and did not learn Torah?
Yeah, well, I kind of hinted that I think there's an answer in the fact that you could learn Torah without Torah, because you could learn, had the Torah not been given, you could learn, right, Derekh Chaim from the rooster, and right. So I did sort of throw out the beginning of an answer, but I don't have a full one.
That's not what
I liked the question. What?
The Maharal is not saying that.
No, the Maharal is not saying that at all. The Maharal is saying that there is no shleimus without Torah, but he doesn't say whether. He doesn't discuss learning.
Okay,
let's keep on going. Let's see what he does with it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
he's really trying to, what he's working with is not learning Torah. He's trying to explain that the Amud HaOlam of Torah is the Tov in and of oneself, is Shleimus. Right? He mapped out 3 kinds of Tov, and now he's saying that the pillars are each of them. Right? Hu bishvil Torah, kasher yom.
Is he saying that the Tov of the Torah is the crown of the pillar of Torah, and then Avodah is the relationship to God, and Gemilas Chasadim is relationship to people? Is that what he's going?
And that's why he said that the Mishnah opens Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim. Yes. Okay. He defined 3 kinds of Tov, and now he's saying the 3 kinds of Tov are the 3 pillars.
That didn't click for me.
Well, that's because he didn't say it yet. We stopped in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we got to finish the paragraph because we only have half the point so far, right?
Where is
that in relation to my mouse?
2 lines.
Up north 2 lines.
Okay. Lefichach shleimus ha'adam atzmo achu nechshav habriya chashuva sheyesh bo hatov. So the shleimus of a person in and of themselves, so that the person is thought a significant creature, significant person that has Tov, hu bishvil HaTorah. This is for the Torah. Kasher yomar al ha'adam shu bal Torah. V'davar zeh ain't tzarich raya. It doesn't need proof. Ki b'vadai shvilas brias ha'adam asher hu nota lios behema. Because it's obvious that a person is lowly, right? The lowly nature of a person is that you would incline toward being like an animal. Umala abriya, and the quality, the positive side of a human, kasher niftal min behemoths, is when you're separated from being an animal. I would say that that's true by definition, and never mind bavadai. A person is not an animal when they're not like an animal. Person's a person when they're not like an animal. I mean, I'm missing to me, this is true by definition. Ein zerak al yedei Torah sichlis. This is new, and this is only through the Torah of Seichel, shebezen nechshav bria shlema tova, bal ma'ala mitzad atzmo. Through the Torah sichlis, a person becomes a complete person, Tov inherently, kasher hu bal seichel, when he has a little head on his shoulders. When a person thinks correctly, they're not acting like an animal, and therefore a person's a person and Tov in and of themselves. The kasher hu bal Torah, and when a person is a master or embodies Torah, zehu tov mitzad atzmo, that is good in and of itself. Ein davar ba'olam shal yado nechshav ha'adam atzmo bal ma'ala rak b'Torah, and there is nothing. Ein davar ba'olam shal yado nechshav ha'adam atzmo bal ma'ala. There's nothing that will make a person be considered ma'ala, of high quality, except Torah. And that's understood. Torah nikreis tov. Torah is called tov. Shneimar ki lekach tov nasati lechem torasi al tazovu. Because I've given you a great, a good gift, a tov gift. Do not abandon my Torah. Kedita b'menachos, it says menachos. Yavo tov ze Moshe. Tov will come, that is Moshe. Shneimar v'terosi ki osot ki tov. V'yikabel tov zu haTorah, and he will receive the tov, that is the Torah. So batov, the tov coming is Moshe. Yikabel tov is the Torah. Tichsiv ki lekach tov nasati lechem. Hari haTorah nikreis tov. Therefore, you see, Torah is called tov. Chol mashe nikreis haTorah tov mipnei shehu sechlis legamrei. And anything that the Torah is called tov because it is pure seichel, pure understanding. Lo seichel enoshi kamo shar chachmos. It's not a human wisdom like all the other wisdoms. Kamo shebiyarnu zeh b'makom acher, like we explained elsewhere. Berachnu b'zeh, and at length. Ki hadavar shu sichli niftal min hachomer legamrei. Hu tov gamor. Something intellectual is totally non-physical, and therefore is
skip the line.
Good. What?
You skipped the line.
Oh, ki hadavar shu sichli.
Before that, Uchamosh Riorn is Zeba Malkamacher. Was ever Kedavar Shutsikli Nivdal.
Nivnal me chomer lagamri. Yeah, I did read that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It is totally separated from chomer. Hu tov gamor is complete tov. L'kacha Torah tova gamor b'frat, and therefore the Torah is the specific complete good. So he's taking Torah as the ultimate kind of wisdom that is seichel because it's God's, and therefore tov is the path to shleimus and the path to. Therefore Torah is the path to shleimus and the path to tov in and of itself. Behefach zeh, and the opposite, hadavar shu chamri, hu ra gamor, something that's physical is totally bad. V'davar zeh beyarnu b'kama makamos. We explain that in many places. Ve'in laharich kan. Ki hadavar zeh hu barur, this is clear as day. Ki hachomer davak hu hara, davak bo hara. Evil clings to the physical. Beyarnu zeh b'akdama. That's, by the way, not exactly the same thing. It's one thing to say that physicality is dangerous because evil clings to it. It's another thing to say that physicality is itself evil. He starts out by saying, right, that Chomer Davuk, where was it? Who ra gamor, it's complete evil. And now he's saying davak bo bahara. And those are different things. It's not just like slightly different phrasings. I personally would take it to mean a person who is nivdal from out the chomer is tov gamor. It's not that chomer is evil. It's that being, having taivos that are chomer is evil. If you could stand and watch the chomer and the chomeriyut of ourselves as a third person, it wouldn't be evil. What do you think? Too much me, not enough Maharal?
Yeah, I'm just thinking you can't really divorce yourself from physicality until you're dead.
No, but you could. But to the extent that a person doesn't live for the next meal, to take my own weakness, right? Mm-hmm. A person has reached a certain spirituality and a certain tov that somebody who does live for the next meal doesn't have. There's a lack of shleimus in living for the chomer.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to say that it's not, he's not saying that, just like he said that separation from physicality is tov gamor. Just like he said that physical is tov gamor, I want to say that when he talks about chomriyut as being ra gamor, and then nidvak bo hara, he's really saying hadavar shu chamri is ra. It's not chamri that's ra. It's when you turn yourself into, like, you're not nivdal from the chomer. Not that the chomer is ra. The chomer is dangerous. It's a tool, but making your life about the chomer is what's ra. And that's why he says that the chomer is davak bar ra. I don't know how else to explain the separation, but I'm basically shoehorning my own message into his words because I can't explain his words at face value.
He says he explained it in the introduction, which I have not learned. Did you?
I did, but like too many years ago to be worth much. Okay, we'll take a look. Maybe by next week we'll have both read the introduction, or one of us will read the introduction, and I'll have more to say on the subject. V'chol asher hu rachok min hachomer kmo haTorah she was seichel eloki baruch tov l'gamri. Fichach hadavar shu ma'ala min ha'adam min ha'beima raya lav ha'metzias. Lefichach shleimus ha'adam ba'atzmo hu al yidei Torah bilvad v'lo zu lazeh. Lefichach amar atana eloki ki zeh ha'amud echad shalom omed alav hu ha'Torah ma'asher Torah hi mishlemes ha'adam aju bria shleima mitzad atzmo. Because Torah completes the person until they are a complete thing in and of itself. In my mind, the metaphor was something I heard once at a talk at Aish, that you can't be, if you open up the user's manual, then you can take good care of the watch, use the watch the way it was designed, and you have a great watch. That to them was the relationship between Torah and Shleimus. You need divine wisdom to know what Hashem, to know how to do what Hashem made you to do.
It's a little different because the watch is not bad if you don't read the manual.
Okay, so that was actually the next point I was going to raise. The word good and bad, and Tov and Ra for that matter, more Tov than Ra, but the word Tov and the word good, so let's just leave it at that, have two meanings. A good pen writes clearly, doesn't leak all over your pocket, gets the job done, and doesn't do what you don't want. It's not a moral statement about pens. It's a functional statement about pens. Pen functions well. We call it good. Then there's moral good, which is a different thing, and that's what he's talking about. So my suggestion was actually that last phrase was a lie, and it's not a different thing. What we call moral good, the reason why both are called Tov is a pen that functions well writes well, and a person that functions well is morally good. Because being morally good is our function.
Maybe like a good pen then is wasn't made in a sweatshop or with child labor or something like that.
Yeah, but that's not the pen's fault. I mean, that's more like Mamzeros versus Tovara.
Okay.
The pen's a mamzer, right? Its parentage was defective. It's not its fault. You can't judge the pen for it. Okay. I don't know. Whatever you think of that. But my point was more that there's two uses of the word Tov. And rather than just leave it as there are two uses of the word Tov, what if we say they were the same use? So that a pen is judged by how well it writes, and a person is judged by how moral they are. We did what we were made to do, right? A pen does what Bic made it to do when it writes well. The human does what God made it to do when we are moral. That was the suggestion I want to make why they're both called Tov. This is very, very far from the Maharal's point, but it would explain why you need Torah to be Tov within yourself, and why I thought of the instruction manual metaphor when I said that, because you don't, the big pen won't know that it's supposed to write, or even what writing is, unless Bic gave it a manual it could read. Okay, it falls apart here because big pens are cheap little things that don't think at all. No seichel. They're totally chomer. Bad metaphor. But you got what I mean, I hope, right? Mm-hmm. The Torah gives you the ability to be shalom, because without the Torah, you don't know what your function is, so you don't know what your shleimus is supposed to look like, right? A ballpoint pen can't be judged unless you know it's a tool for writing. If you think it's a tool for punching holes in leather, it doesn't do that well. It works, maybe. I mean, softer leathers, but it doesn't do that well. I would like to finish Ches before we call it a night, because that's the other two pillars. I mean, that's just, it rounds out. It's a good stopping point. V'achar kach al hat avoda. Avoda, he doesn't belabor avoda and Torah and K'milas Chasadim as much. He believes that Torah needs a lot more explaining how it's shleimus. Which I hope will agree that the next two are more straightforward because it's late. Amar al ha'avoda. V'avoda shehi avoda etzem. Uberishona hi avodas karbonos. So the second kind of completeness is avoda, and what is the what is the ultimate worship, the essence of worship, and the first of worship? That's why I use the word ultimate. Avoda karbanos. Vein davar yoser rishon is that nothing's more primary in terms of avoda than this. V'chol shar advarim shemasiyas hamitzvos lasos ritzon habori ritzon Hashem yisbarach. They're doing the mitzvos in order to do Hashem's will. Nichlalim tachas avoda. They're still called avoda. Rak avoda he rishon v'kodem al hakol. It's called avoda because the avoda of the karbanos is the ultimate expression of relating to God. But all the mitzvos, if you're doing the mitzvos in order to do Hashem's will, is included under avoda. Lefichach avoda hi amud el ha'olam. I'm pretty sure that's a typo. It's a pillar of the world. Shemizeh yachshov ha'adam shalem v'tov el mi shabaro. That person should be thought of as whole and good toward the one who created him. Kasher hu oved lo, when he worships Hashem. V'tzarech sheyeh adam shalem v'tov lebaro. And a person should be shalom and tov when it comes to their relationship with God. Uchneged agimel. Now the third one, shetzarech sheyeh adam shalom v'tovim zulaso. Zehu al yidei gemilus chasadim. So that is supporting people through loving kindness. Kasher hu osel zulaso chesed chinam. When a person does a chesed for nothing, no ulterior motive, just for free. Hine ein safek shebezehu tov lezulaso. No doubt that is called tov to the other. Vein davar yoser tov mizeh kasher osa tov lezulaso bechinam vazu tov legamrei. I think he's saying there's no doubt that there's nothing more good than this. To also say that Gemilas Chasadim is only one of the interpersonal mitzvos, and it's being used because it's the ultimate of interpersonal mitzvos. You're doing a chesed with no ulterior motive, nothing else, just doing supporting somebody else out of the loving kindness of your heart. And this is actually a better place to stop. Does anybody have thoughts, questions, total rejections?
I don't have thoughts or questions. I think I've given enough of those. I just want to point out that there's this rich commentary going on in the chat. Did you see that, Micha?
No, I did not, because I can't. I'm following. I have to read the text, right? Oh, 1 second. Let me unshare for a second. If I could see where I put the unshare bar. I don't even know where I put the. Oh, there it is. Stop share. If I stop the share, I get the button that says chat.
There you go.
Oh yeah, there's a lot there. Fortunately the chat is recorded, so I could read this later. I was wondering why Judith fell off. I was kind of worried that I was using too much Hebrew. But anyway, that shouldn't have been recorded, so whatever. I goofed. But in any case, let me move the people's faces over to under the camera, so I'm not looking off at an angle. That's very weird. That is actually what John's room looks like. This is not a background.
He's still going on, but shortly.
Yeah, well, John, everything I do is shortly.
Yeah.
But could you mute if you're not talking to us?
Right, sorry. No,
okay.
I had the phone in my pocket, sorry.
It's fine. No, but that, yeah. He has this thing that his house looks like that. I mean, I know this is a fake background, but his house really, he collects old Sfarim. It's very impressive, actually. Anyway, back to this story. So I have problems with this idea that physicality is inherently evil. And I have problems with this idea that as opposed to being a really, really hard thing to use constructively, a challenge, as I put it. I also have a hard time with the idea that a person who didn't study Torah has no path to being better than he was yesterday and is just like an animal, which is why I tried making it more of a general, of a spectrum, like or that there are other ways to access the divine wisdom other than reading the Torah, but it's still Torah because it's what you're accessing is what's written in the Torah. You're just getting it from other places. Those are ideas that I had problems with that I tried reading into the text. I'm reading them into the text. We don't really know that Maharal had a problem with either of those ideas. just because I found a way to live with the text without accepting them. So that's sort of where he is. So where he's going with this is that a person has two relationships in self-perfection, which I framed as 3 relationships, because you have to work on yourself to reach that perfection. So I consider that a relationship. And the 3 relationships allow me to relate these 3 pillars to the crowns on the 3 kalim in the Mishkan. And therefore, when you have 4 parshios, 13% of the Torah or so, discussing, a building that doesn't survive Shlomo HaMelech, which is really unfair. I mean, the part that I'm discussing is true through by Yesheni and is going to be true by Shlishi, I think. Because I'm discussing the placement of the kalim in the Beis Hamikdash, I believe is actually teaching us about our capacities for these 3 kinds of relationships, for these 3 kinds of good. And I hope that by the time we look at all these texts, which admittedly may be months from now, we can go back to the Mishkan and see, why is this on the left and this on the right? And why is this inside? And why is this gold? And why is this copper? And that everything we've learned about these capacities actually, not in a compelling way because I'm making this up, but at least fit something about how, each of the kalim are made. So that was sort of where I wanted to go. My focus is really, though, more on the self-awareness and the Torah of what it means to be good, and the centrality of defining good in terms of relationships. If anybody has anything else they want to ask before I hit stop, if not, you can ask questions after I hit stop. And if not, you can ask questions. We have a WhatsApp channel. If you went to the Kloyes, it's one of the links on the right side of the webpage. If you didn't join the WhatsApp channel yet, and you could discuss things there, just like you could discuss things on the chat during. I wish there was a way to subscribe the WhatsApp channel to the chat so that conversation started and the chat can continue after, but that's the way it works. But yeah, the fact that I don't follow the chat is part of the reasons why I ask people to interrupt, because otherwise the chat means I have to be in 3 places. I have to make sure people are listening. I'm not boring anybody. I have to make sure that I'm following the text, which, as you noticed, is a challenge for me. And I have to read the chat. I just can't do all 3. So with that, I'm gonna stop recording. I probably shouldn't have done before that sentence, but okay.